Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Catch Up After College podcast. We're catching up after college on the lessons of life lived by leaders. We're a safe space grounded in grace, and our aim's always to aid. We may be post-graduation, but we're never post-education. I'm Isaiah Brown, your host, and thank you for tuning in today. Today, we have the one and only Toby Castle here with us. What's happening?
Hey, man. Good to be here. Thanks for having us, and excited for our conversation.
Yeah, I'm loving the background. It's very eventful.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, cool. All right. So I may have this completely wrong, but are you a fan of the Chelsea Football Club?
I am a big fan of Chelsea Football Club. It's a bit of a sad day today. We played Liverpool, lost 5-3. It's a little bit concerning, but we have one more game. If we win on the weekend against Wolverhampton, then we'll be in Champions League football next year. So you can always hope, right? Always hope.
Yeah, for sure. I hear they're pretty good, though. That's a good team to go with.
Like they Chelsea. Are good. They won Europe back in 2012 and have been pretty successful over the last 10 to 15 years. So I've been a fan now for, coming up on almost 30 years.
Dang. Okay. That's good because we're about to do some trivia. But
good.
You mind explaining it to the Americans? When they hear Chelsea Football Club, they probably don't know what that is.
Sure. Chelsea Football Club's a team in West London in the English Premier League. They started in 1905. I think they've won 7 premierships, if you include the first division. Their first one was back in 1950. And probably the best player of all time was Frank Lampard.
Oh, man. Dude, you already answered 2 of my questions. Oh, my God.
Did I really? Okay. Sorry.
Man, okay. Well, we're still going to do it. We're going to act like that.
All right. Come on.
All right. All right. So who's the current head coach?
Current head coach is Frank Lampard.
Yep, that guy.
Yep.
What are 2 North London clubs that have a long-standing rivalry with Chelsea?
Tottenham and Arsenal.
Yes, sir. Name the one American on the team.
Christian Pulisic.
Oh, this is too easy. And I was going to say, what year was the club founded? Last question.
1905.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Cool, man. I guess I should have made that way harder for you, but now
Absolutely.
I know in the future. Next time when you're on.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll just jump right into it. You mind telling us where you're from and can you describe what your life was like before college?
Sure, man. I grew up on Sydney's northern beaches in a little beach town called Collegiate. I lived there till I was about 20 or 21 and then moved to Manly. Lived in Manly for a couple of years and then my college experience was a little bit different. Began in the US at the University of Washington, but that was only like a very short spell. Then went to Sydney University for 4 years, did a Bachelor of Education. Then began teaching and coaching high school basketball. I ran a high school basketball program for about 7 years while I was working full time. Kind of dabbled a little bit. So I applied to the London School of Economics in 2008. Was accepted, but didn't have the money to go. It was about 30,000 Australian dollars for the year to go, and I just didn't have the coin, so couldn't do it. So I then did a year part-time at the University of New South Wales doing a Masters of Community Development, but dropped out of that because life just got too hectic with coaching sport and things like that. And then end of 2012, started 2013, I started doing a Masters of Global Leadership at Fuller Seminary, which I graduated did another degree there, and now I'm doing a doctorate there in theology and ethics.
Dang. How many colleges was that?
That I attended or that I graduated from?
I guess both, or
Well, I
attended.
think I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think it's like 7 programs that I applied for, that I graduated Sydney, and 3 that I've graduated from, and I'm halfway through a doctorate at the moment. So,
Dang.
so once I finish this, which will be in about, I don't know, maybe 2.5 to 3 years. Being international, I got to pay up front. I can't do any like student loans or anything like that you Americans are able to do. Once I've graduated there, that would be my 4th degree. But I'm leaving out one. I'm currently in an executive program at Harvard, which I have 2 classes left before I'm finished there.
Wow. Do you feel like you're winding down, like this is your last college phase of your life?
Absolutely not. I think when I got the conviction after I did my bachelor's degree to actually understand what the posture and practice of a lifelong learner was, I realized that education can take many forms. It doesn't need to be institutional, but I think what institutional and organizational education does do is it creates accountability. And accountability really helps with what I call learning integrity, which is one's ability to remain kind of true to a specific goal or purpose around an educational framework or philosophy. So one of my goals is, like, as I continue to learn things theoretically, that I am able to embody them practically. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you tell us what your life looks like right now? Like, are you working full time while in college?
So I am working full time. It's really funny, and you're probably aware of this with Kelley, is that Kelley and I got married just a couple of days into the COVID pandemic. So we've been married for 4 months now, which is great. But being on a green card track, even though I'm working, I can't get paid. So guess you would say that I'm a perpetual volunteer for the organization that I was going to be employed by anyway. If COVID wasn't around, I was meant to start at the beginning of April on a work visa, but I couldn't go back to Australia to get that paperwork done. So I'm working full time and waiting for my permission to work to come through so I can earn some money. So in short, I am working full time, but studying part time. So doing a lot of pre-reading at the moment for my next class, which will be the theology of Martin Luther King. Then I'm doing one on Black liberation theology and James Cone, and then
Wow.
I'll have two more classes, and then I'm done.
Man, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's got to be hectic, but learning all this stuff in college, looking back, is there anything you wish you had learned in high school, or what do you call it in Australia?
We call it high school. Yeah.
Oh, I thought
Yep.
you called it like secondary or something, or
Oh yeah. So like we kind of break ours into primary, secondary, and tertiary. So
yeah.
primary school is elementary school. High school for us starts in the 7th grade and goes through to the 12th grade. And then college or university is our tertiary stuff. But if there's something that I would have learnt in high school, I didn't go to a very diverse school. My school was fairly white. The part of the country that I'm originally from was, when I went through back in the 90s and early 2000s, was probably the widest vestige in the country. So I I wish my learning experience was more ethnically and racially diverse. That didn't happen until I went to university and was exposed to, I guess, narratives and existential perspectives and pedagogical practices that where white wasn't seen as normal. So that's probably what I wish I learned more.
Yeah. So what you're currently studying, how has it shifted like the perspectives that you have on life?
Sure. So I first went to Ferguson in 2014 after the death of Michael Brown. And I would say that that experience on the ground there, as well as others in cities like Oakland and Baltimore, really shifted my understanding of who I was and what I was doing and who I was becoming. I think it really shifted in me kind of this key question, which I would say a friend and mentor of mine, Ben McBride, would say is that if our first question is what we're doing or what are we doing, it's the wrong first question to ask. The right first question needs to be, who are we becoming? And I realized during those moments, as I learned not only theoretically but existentially the realities of race and violence here in the US, that I needed that it it was the calling of mine, and it became an imperative posture that as I learn, I use those skills to contend with and for those who can't contend for themselves. So not as a means of trying to build a following, not as a means of trying to make as much money as I can, not as a means of simply trying to get educated, but using my education, understanding the complexities of the world that we live in to make it as accessible for everyone else. So really be a conduit of dismantling cultural complexity. So yeah.
Yeah. Was there a wake up moment for you? If I could bring up an example. So have you heard the movie Fruitvale Station, or you know what it's about?
I sure have. Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah, that guy. So me and a friend, it was a white friend, we're watching it in when we're roommates in Australia. And when he gets killed at the end of the movie, representing Oscar Grant, that's who he is playing.
Yep.
It was like, no, that could never happen. Why would a police officer just shoot a unarmed guy like that? That can't happen. I was like, yeah, it does happen. Like, was there a wake up moment sort of like that for you?
Absolutely. I think I probably went on I guess what we could call a sojourn from that kind of late 2014 period through to kind of the end of 2016, realizing that what I thought during my first real exposure, like I'd heard of the murder of Oscar Grant in Oakland, but I just thought it was the exception to the rule. I didn't understand that it was almost like a violent cultural norm that with the biases and the training that law enforcement practice and the legal protection that they have as well, that it was more of an occurrence than I thought it was. So I guess I always say that it was on the streets of Ferguson that I found Jesus, or Jesus found me, and it really pivoted and changed everything, not only about my faith, but about my posture and my practice. That no matter where I am, that I'm continuing to use the things that I've been equipped with and the pursuit and practice of education to engage in leveling the playing field for people that the system overtly discriminates against.
Yeah. So how do you personally tackle racism and injustice of that sort?
Um, so when you look at culture, um, I think I would argue anthropologically that culture is the intersection of language, practice, and people. And I think the easiest thing that we can change is our language. So I think most superficially when we talk about um, things that we kind of observe or encounter, um, when people begin to use certain items of language that either make fun of other people's skin tone, make fun of other people's cultural stereotypes, make fun of, and like it becomes the butt or the cause of jokes. I think that's probably the easiest way to curb racism. I think language also builds culture and systems. So if we're able to change the way people use their words, we're able to change the way anything is encountered. And then you need to change people's practices. So with the organizations that I now will work for because I don't get paid yet. I only work for Black institutions. I don't work. My previous job in Australia, I worked for an elite white boys school, but really found that difficult because it was a 120, 130-year-old institution, had a lot of strong cultural practices that were very difficult to change. So if I couldn't change it, I had to change me. And so I realized that I couldn't work for that institution again. And that's okay. Like they do a lot of good things, but I realized that, life's too short to work for an organization or be a part of the community that doesn't validate you. And so you got to go where the energy is. And so in moving to work for Black institutions, like in my current role, I'm the only white guy in leadership. Everyone else is a man or woman of color, actually in both institutions. So I think people can say a lot of things, people can do a lot of things, but they really need to begin to embody it consistently so people can tell that it's not just a fad. It's not like the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, but it is something that is deeply embedded in what I am and what I do.
Yeah, man. I'm sure you've heard of the white savior complex, that whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yep.
it's pretty crazy when like you just see it in movies and all that kind of sort. But I love what you said you're doing. You're working with like Black institutions and all that. How do you find that balance of always coming arm in arm with people of color and not being the white savior?
Sure. I find it comes about in understanding my role and understanding my gifts, talents, and abilities. I know that I'm good at writing policy. I know that I'm good at writing. And so I actually find my role in these institutions actually doing a lot of the background work. So whether it's ghostwriting or whether it's writing vision and mission statements, is that even though I may write down the words and type the keys, everything is a collaboration. So I want to ensure that there's not a white voice behind what's being said, but people can tell that it's a voice of color because I'm working for Black institutions. I think also, and I know this is about education, but my default is that I go theological. I think when we understand kind of hand in hand Genesis 4 with Cain and Abel, and when we understand, I think it's Genesis 16 with Hagar's interaction with God, and thirdly, the parable of the Samaritan, and I don't want to say good Samaritan because it's not actually about what he did. It's about the type of community the Samaritan was building and understanding the sociological understanding of who the Samaritan was. That I've seen a lot of people comment recently that we need to be Samaritans. Reality is being a white educated male is that culturally I can't be, but I can still contribute to what the Good Samaritan was trying to do. And so I think from Genesis 4, to circle back, when it's asked, am I my brother's keeper? The kind of undertone of that is, I only succeed when we succeed. Is that this hyper-individualism that exists not only in the US, but in Western civil society, affirms this idea of the self-made individual, which simply doesn't exist. Like we are made for community, we are made to do life together, and we're made to succeed together. Hagar, with her interaction with God, it's actually the first time that anyone in the Bible names God. And when you understand the syntax of the Hebrew, the story actually isn't about Abram and Sarai and who's having a baby. The story is about Hagar. She's been marginalized by Sarah, and she's the object of the narrative. God's concern is purely and only for her, and she's the marginalized one in the story. I think we miss that in our understanding and exegesis of the story. And then thirdly, I want to lift up this kind of explicitly. Reggie Williams, who's the associate professor of ethics at McCormick Theological Seminary in Chicago, talks about this idea of the lawyer who brings up the story to Jesus in regards to, who is my neighbor? And Jesus goes on to talk about the Levite, the priest, and the Samaritan. That question, who is my neighbor? He's actually not asking Jesus who he can concern himself with. The question is actually fundamentally evil, because the question is asking, who can I exclude? Who is it okay for me to exclude? And when Jesus goes, well, let me tell you a story, people are expecting him to say a priest, a Levite, and a Hebrew walk into a bar. But actually he twists it and he goes, a priest, a Levite, and a Samaritan. And people are like, why are you talking about those people? Samaritans were half caste, they weren't part of civil society, and they were meant to exist on the margins, which is why in John 4, we hear about the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. When did she come and get water? It wasn't in the early morning or late in the day. It was in the heat of the day. Why? Because it was the worst time to do it, and everyone else was at home resting. So I know that there's a perception of the white savior complex, but I try and keep myself accountable by giving people permission that I trust to tell me if I'm overstepping the line, or actually if I need to speak up more often.
Wow, that's great stuff. So what's the most practical way you put to use all that you've studied so far?
I'd probably say, I'm a great believer that education is the primary tool for social upward mobility. So in my current role as managing director of a boys' school based out of Baltimore, we're a boys' school. It's only been around for 5 years. A boys' school for boys of color. 98% of our over 500 boys are African American. 2% are Hispanic, and there's one white boy. So this is the most practical way, that in the things that I'm doing and the opportunities that I'm trying to build and the partnerships and the research, this is probably the best way that I'm putting into practice all the things that I've learned and the things that I've been formed in since like 2013 or 2014.
Yeah. And what would you say has been the biggest roadblock or hurdle you've had to face since graduating college? We'll say your first college.
I'd say people's perception of youth. I know when people are younger, they're ambitious and they have probably over-ambitious perceptions of themselves. And I'm not sure if you're aware of the narrative of Icarus in Greek mythology. So, like, his father gave him wings, and he flew too close to the sun, and so his wings burnt, and he fell down. People kind of tend to use that narrative as a way of talking about how, don't be too ambitious, don't put, too many things before yourself. And a lot of people then actually buy into that, and a lot of older people then say, take your time, and don't kind of overstep the mark, and be patient and train. I think that dualism becomes our own roadblock. I think what we need to try and navigate is we need to be ambitious and have dreams, as well as learn specifically under people. I think the biggest roadblock I had was that very early on, I didn't understand the power of a mentor. And when I began to understand the power of having mentors in my life, like, I have 6 at the moment, and they all have their like specific role, and they all have their nuances in which they're teaching and forming me. I think I think the biggest roadblock I had was not having a person who I gave permission to speak into my life, but was listening to all these different voices that were attempting to talk into my life, but I didn't probably have the wisdom or discernment to understand who I should listen to.
So what do you look for in a mentor for you personally?
Personally, for me, I don't look for concrete outcomes. I look for soft skills, or I tend to call them like flavors. So I look for certain things that I want replicated in myself. I think that's why it's more than okay to have one mentor, because one mentor doesn't, and also should never, embody everything that we want to become. That's a little bit godlike, and that's a little bit idolatrous. And so understanding, I guess, myself, there are then things that I want to work on so I can become a better version of Toby. One case in point is that I have a very good friend. He's probably he's maybe 21 years older than me. He lives actually down the coast here in California. His name's Bill Cody. And Bill, I've never been around a person who uses language and insight to affirm an individual. And he's not afraid to kind of, almost in the most awkward of times, actually stop everything. And when he recognizes something in an individual, it is not uncommon for him to go, whoa. We just need to take a moment now to affirm you, because what I've seen in you, you need to continue to fan into flame, as an example. And so he has this ability to see things in other people that they don't see in themselves. And I know that I want that in me. And that's why I give him permission to like call me out, to affirm me, to speak truth in life. So, yeah.
Yeah. And while studying your, I guess, different majors, in what ways did it
Mhm.
challenge your faith and vice versa?
Um, Probably about the age of 19 or 20, I probably deconstructed my entire faith, where I guess I deconstructed everything except the sovereignty of God, because I didn't feel that that we can kind of touch or deconstruct what we merely don't understand. Um, and so what I found was that I mistakenly believed without discernment or critique everything that either my pastor said or that certain people said that I had put up on a pedestal. I had conflated that as what God is saying. And so I had to actually go through this process of unlearning, which is unlearning this kind of these kind of ingrained perceptions and postures which I thought were normal. Things like misogyny, things like racial bias, where white was normal and white was right. Things like a woman's role in like the church, a woman's role in leadership, or a woman's role in teaching. I grew up in a context where women rarely, if ever, taught, and that was wrong. I grew up in a context where I guess originally you could say that it was cessationist, where they believed in this, that the work and the power and the Spirit of God ceased. And so it was just kind of, church became more of a literacy comprehension than anything. So I had to unlearn those things and
Yeah.
understand that as broad and beautiful as the human race is, as is people's interpretation and wonder of God, and that I have the ability, if I'm humble enough, to learn with and from anyone else who walks this earth with wisdom and discernment, and understanding that critique is not criticism. And I think that actually kind of leaves us fairly open-handed in the way that we learn, and open to the way that God can possibly move.
So, reflecting on 2020, it's been a crazy year. What are the first couple of things that come to mind for you personally?
I think the first couple of things that come to mind is that humans need to be okay with themselves. We live in community, but I think what I like to call physical distancing, not social distancing. Because if we go back to that idea on culture, language is really important. And like, even though you and I, we live 25 minutes from one another, and we would do church on a weekly basis, it's probably in this moment of COVID that we've probably actually gotten to know each other really well. And so I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing, if we kind of look at the notion of education, is that people need to be in embodied spaces and places to really learn well. I think it's possible to learn virtually, but I think we learn best when we're physically proximal to other people. Thirdly, I would say is that the way the church has been called to function, where they've been unable to gather, has actually caused the church to realize that this is probably the best way that it should be functioning. That I think there was a toxic belief that people's gifts and talents can only exist in a 60 to 90 minute service. But by taking away the service, it's now somehow miraculously and theologically opened up this reality of the manner in which people can use their gifts and talents. And it's so much more expansive than just the this kind of production that exists in a 60 to 90-minute service. So I think by taking away the service, it has actually been a real blessing. And I think it's in some way shown some people's creativity in how they do time, but also it's shown a lot of the people's lack of creativity, that people are trying to replicate virtually what they know face to face. When actually this COVID moment, I guess we could call it, as we exist in our COVID corners, is actually asking for us to be a whole lot more creative, knowing that everyone is a creative and there are few that are artists, to make our world a more beautiful place than I guess we currently may fear or perceive it to be.
So, what has been your church's response and your company's response to the recent events of, well, COVID, but the Black Lives Matter movement as well, with the recent killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor? What are the actions that your company and church have taken?
Sure. Well, I work for Black institutions. So I think I love what my boss says. My boss, Jack Pennell was actually, he was, I'm having a mind blank. He was David Lewis's press secretary when David Lewis became a member of the House. And so he has all this experience on the Hill. And he says, in regards to our practice of building and creating more schools for boys of color, that our educational practice is our protest.
Nice.
I have a good friend of mine, Naya Rahman, who's currently doing her master's at Fuller Seminary. And in the moments that she talks with me and Kelley, she always says, I just got no time because, I need to be online and on Instagram and telling people about stuff. And I said, girl, don't forget that your study is your protest. Mm. And now she's a woman of color. And, if we can talk about the intersectionality of that, of being a woman and a woman of color and all that jazz, and the way that the system bends away from people like that, she needs to continue, and I encourage her to continue to get that degree, and that can only be a blessing for her and everyone else. And then, as far as church goes, church has been somewhat of a mixed bag. They've been a little bit slow. We then helped kind of coordinate a peaceful, nonviolent protest, which was great. And I honestly think that the church currently doesn't have the frameworks to successfully, and I'm talking church broadly now, doesn't have the frameworks to successfully engage well with the complex notion of race and faith. In regards to Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, historically Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, Walter Scott, Oscar Grant, that for them it seems like a moment rather than a lived practice and posture. For them, it seems like as long as they can return to their metrics of how many people enter the room, how many people are giving, and so on and so forth, that is their definition of success. And so I think what this moment has done is it's really challenged their metrics, and it's really brought like-minded people who are willing to lean into the pain and remain there to participate in this longitudinal and lifelong journey of bringing about justice by being loving and courageous. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
What keeps coming to mind is I just want things to look more colorful, in the
Oh yeah,
sense that,
absolutely,
yeah, not just
absolutely.
rosters, but leadership and all that. And
Hmm.
people have been brought up differently. Me personally, growing up, we always had people coming over to our house after church on Sundays, and it'd be people of every color and all
So did
that.
I, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
it's like you kind of just want people to get it. Like, how do we make this happen? Do you think?
Um, I think I think we need to go back to that notion of creativity. Um, I don't know about you, but I return to that notion of how do we know when we're embodying this notion of church, which the um, in the New Testament they talk about this idea of the ecclesia, which are like the called out ones. And the interesting thing is that they're called out of their homes and their private spaces, and they're called into public spaces to exist and to be seen, not into dark rooms and services for 60 or 90 minutes a week, or even a whole day on a Sunday, not stepping outside to engage in the public square. I think what it means is that we begin to embody um, ways in which everyone has a seat at the table. So church actually looks more like having lunch and dinner.
Uh,
Church looks more like going to get coffee and going for a walk. Because I don't know about you, but it's in those intimate conversations that actually, with people that we know we can trust, and we know that if we're not around them, that they will speak well of us, and they won't speak behind our back. They won't be condescending, and they won't be saying things to other people that they're not willing to say to ourselves. But we actually embody these things as we have dinner and as we break bread. That to me is what church actually should look like most simply, but then we can get as creative as we want in public spaces and places, but it doesn't have to be hard. Um, I just think we start to bridge across difference and creatively widen our circle of human concern.
Awesome. That's good stuff. And just looking at your life and everything, what's your dream job? Do you feel like it can be all encompassed into one position, or do you think it's multiple things all at once?
Um, I would probably say the role that I'm doing, I love. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else, or the roles I have, or doing it for anyone else. I think that the people we work for, we should, because we spend so much time with them, right, should be considered family. And if you're not willing to spend that much time with people, then don't spend that much time with people. So, as far as a dream job, um, you know, I'm really open to what God has. I just am thankful that every night I get to go to bed and I work with and for, and I get to co-create around the people and the things that I do, which is around education, which is around um, being conduits of other people's potential, and really coming alongside them and helping them be um, maximizers of who they are.
Awesome. And we've come to a big moment. What books, podcasts, or any learning resources do you recommend at the moment?
Totally. Well, um, I have my head kind of buried in a lot of doctoral work, but I'm not going to lift up that. I've just finished reading James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, and um, No Name Street. I'm about to start Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Birds Sing. I really lift up, as far as a podcast, The Inverse podcast by Jared McKenna and Drew Hart. And I'm currently reading again because I'm running a book club on the intersection of like race, faith, and personal formation. And we're currently reading Jennifer Eberhardt's book Biased, which explores implicit racial bias and its everyday function in our everyday lives.
Nice. I was writing them all down.
Were you really?
Like I wasn't paying attention. Yeah.
If you want, I'll send you that list and some specific episodes of those podcasts as well.
Okay. Yeah, cool. That works too. That's probably way better.
Cool. Great.
Cool. All
Good,
right.
Man. Good.
So we're just going to end it with probably 2 more questions. So, well, this is a 2-part question. If there was one thing you could ask your future self, what would it be? And if there's one thing you could tell your high school self, what would it be?
I think I'm going to answer both of them with a story, if I may.
Yeah.
So about 2 years ago, I was doing some work for my former school, and we were examining kind of these values and virtues that we wanted to instill in our boys, but also see how we could test and research if they were cultivated in the practice of who they were through their educational experiences. So I go to this first grade class. So I walk into a room and there's like 16 to 20, 5 and 6-year-old boys. And so I go in, I sit on like this undersized green plastic chair. Like, I think you're 6'3", you're a little bit bigger than me. So, our knees are in our chest. and like I watch them do some of their activities, and then I get them to come and sit on the floor, and I introduce myself. I'm like, hey, I'm Mr. Castle. And I'm here to specifically talk to you about the notion of trust. And I open with, how do you know you can trust someone? And these hands, they fly up. And this first boy goes, hey, sir, I know I can trust a person when they give me a gift. I'm like, great, good job. Your love language is gifts. Now I know that. The second kid goes, sir, I know I can trust my mum when she kisses me on the forehead. I'm like, beautiful. This third kid, his hand's up still. And he goes, sir, I know I can trust my parents when they tuck me in at night. I'm like, oh, great. And this fourth kid, over on the right-hand side, like far right, and he's been like, I don't know about you, but like these kids who are like, like this embodied, like I really have the right answer. So I turn to him and I say, yes, what do you think it is? And he goes, sir, I know I can trust someone when I know my name is safe in their mouth.
Whoa.
Yeah, from like 6-year-old.
Wow.
So I wish I was told in high school and college about what it meant to look for mentors that I knew had my name safe in their mouth, rather than trying to like please everyone or only do things by myself or whatever. So I kind of keep that narrative on the forefront of my mind as like a boundary and like a litmus test about is this person that I'm engaging with, are they someone who has my name safe in their mouth? And if they are, great. But if they're not, then I'll set a boundary and move from there.
Wow, that's a genius 6-year-old, but yeah.
Yeah. My bet is that he's probably overheard that from his parents, who are both like clinical psychologists, and they've like that they just say that over and over again. But I know with me, it worked.
Yeah.
So, and it continues to work.
Nice. And Last question for you. If there was one thing anybody could do to make this world more equal for everybody, what is one simple thing they could do to make that happen?
I think it's two parts. I think they need to learn who they are. And then at the same time, use whatever kind of gift they have or talents to examine the region or the city that they live in and try and go and use that gift or talent for the most underprivileged part of that region or city. Try it for like one day. And then from there, have dinner with one person that they've met through that experience. So like they don't have to succeed from the experience. They just have to try and have a meal with the person that they've met from that experience.
Dang. So connection in a sense.
Well, yeah, like I think what I've learned a lot is that, people talk a lot about leadership as taking people somewhere or influence. And I think if they only talk about that, then they really miss the point. Leadership is mostly, if not all, about good relationships. And if you don't have good relationships and you're not able to sit down and have a meal with a person that you're leading or that they are leading you, then something's wrong.
Yeah.
So if from whatever experience they choose to go and have, if they can then have a meal with that person, I think we're well on our way to making a more just and good society.
Awesome. I love that. And I just want to encourage you before we close that I feel like you're really moving forward in the direction that you're called to and just tackling injustice and exposing it and all that. But most importantly, you're doing it in the name of Jesus, and there's more to come. And yeah, you got this. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, man. And what I'm about to say, I hope you don't cut out of this because I know you have the power to, but I really want people who are listening to this to that we take a moment and that in you, you have this gift to be creative in a moment where people aren't, and you have the ability to connect with a lot of people that most people fear to tread. And I see in you, bro, this embodiment of courage and love. So continue to walk in it, bro.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. That's pretty awesome. And
of course, man.
Is there anything you want to promote at the moment? Do you have a website or anything in the works?
I don't have a website. I would say, like I have an Instagram, T_Castle. But being an Aussie, it's kind of weird to promote yourself, but I guess I have to learn to do that if I'm American. So
the whole tall poppy thing.
Tall poppy syndrome, absolutely. I mean, it'd be really good if people would go and check out, I guess, the institution that I work for, Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys. You can find them on Instagram or go to the website. And there are ways to donate. And so we're really using education as our way to level the playing field and protest a broken system. So cool. That's what we could do. Cool.
Do they have a Instagram or anything or online account?
They do. Baltimore Collegiate would be their Instagram handle.
All right. I'll try to tag it once your episode comes out. But
cool, man. Thanks, bro.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on, and I'll let you get to your walk or whatever you got going on after this.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah. And for everyone else, until next time, as we're maturing, we're going to keep learning, stirring up, and chasing after what our Creator created us to do. So have a good one, everyone.
Nice.